Chapter 8. Picked up. 3 years later. Floating on sponge cake, a river of cherry soda carried me toward a giant, floating apple pie. As I drifted closer, it grew brighter and brighter and got harder and harder to look at. I lifted my hands to shield my eyes from the light. It's time to wake up. A slender dagger of sunlight evaded the curtains and found its way into my eyes. I always felt guilty after a pleasant dream. I stifled a yawn. No matter how much I wanted to stay in bed, it was time to start the day. I swung my legs out of bed and hopped down to the smooth pine flooring. I flung open the curtains to let the rest of the sunlight trickle into the cabin. There was no risk of having my privacy encroached on in my secluded slice of heaven. A quick bath and cup of tea would be the perfect primer to an uneventful Sunday. I made my way to the modest bathroom. The faucet turned with a squeak and let forth a cascade of water. While waiting for it to warm, I turned side to side and examined my body in the mirror. I probably had more nicks and scars than an average woman my age. I could thank my stint in the military for the marks, but it didn't bother me. In fact, I took pride in them. I had my reasons for doing what I did. The tub was quickly filling, the water noisily sloshing into the basin. I turned off the faucet and carefully lowered myself into the steaming water. Thank goodness for modern comforts. After so many years of cold showers that had to be taken at the speed of light, a simple bath is more delicious than that giant apple pie from my dream. The soothing warm water made my eyelids heavy again, and I had to fight off the temptation to drift back off to sleep. After soaking and scrubbing, I reluctantly removed myself from the water's embrace. Drying off, I made my way to the dresser. While dressing, I looked longingly at the various family photos on display. I stopped on a photo of my brother, David, and me. I picked it up and smiled. The photo was of us on mischief night. He was dressed as a soldier in a brown and green uniform with a mop of untidy brown hair creeping out from under his cheap plastic helmet. I was dressed as a raggedy black cat. It was the first year we were both old enough to go door to door on our own to ask for treats and candy. Bullies had taken my bag of candy, and David had gotten more than a little bruised retrieving it for me. But retrieve it, he did. He proudly wore the scar above his lip where he had taken a punch. He always looked out for me, and I missed him more than anything. It had been 3 years since I failed to find him. It had been 3 long years since I made my escape from the military bunker where I lived as a soldier and wormed my way back into civilian life. I stayed out of sight for as long as I could, but it couldn't have lasted forever. Between the money I had inherited from my parents after their deaths and the little bit I had saved, I was able to keep to myself for quite a while. When it started to run out, I took on odd jobs where I could. My older brother had taught me many practical skills, and my time in the military didn't hurt either. I could do simple repairs to both vehicles and houses, and I wasn't afraid of manual labor. Luckily, no one around here asked any questions. Because of its size, the people of Tracul respected each other's privacy. The people living outside of Tracul, as I did, even more so. I believed that the military had either given up looking for me or never even bothered to start searching. After all, what was one runaway soldier in the face of brokering a peace agreement with a hostile neighbor? Peace did come, though. The nations of Liuxt and Satru agreed to stop fighting. The borders between our two countries shifted slightly, and life went on. As Colonel Abbott had predicted, the assassination of General Dunn was never made public. His successor, a pudgy dove of a man, erected a monument in Gled to the soldiers who had perished in the war, and the public quickly forgot about the fighting. I didn't forget, though. When I was unable to distract myself with chores or work, I often thought of Alvin, Ferguson, and Barrett. I pulled on a simple outfit consisting of a sweater and a pair of trousers and made my way to the kitchen.
Hi.
Someone called out. I almost fell over from surprise. A strange woman was sitting at my kitchen table, leisurely sipping a cup of coffee.
Come, have a seat.
She beamed. This woman, who was dressed like a lawyer, was inviting me to sit at my own table in my own house. Searching for words, my mouth opened and closed like a fish.
Ma'am, I don't know who you think you are, but
I have some information about your brother.
She cut me off. I went numb, but staggered over to the table and shakily sat down. The woman, who looked to be in her mid-30s but still maintained a youthful, girlish glow, smiled and spooned more sugar into her already cream-colored coffee. I looked so hard for him, but I never found any solid leads to his whereabouts, I thought.
He's why you joined the military, right?
She said knowingly.
You were never really in the army to serve your country. Now were you, Aubrey?
It's as if she could read my thoughts. I held my silence. What she said, however, was true. Of course, women were not technically allowed to be in Lude's armed forces, but I needed to find out what happened to my brother. He was my only remaining family. After his letters stopped arriving, and there was never a notice of his going missing or death in combat, I came to the conclusion that something was awry. So without first analyzing the danger of the situation, I cut my hair and enlisted with some skillfully forged documents. I had great luck in being assigned to the same compound my brother had been stationed in, but that is where my luck had started to run out. I kept my hair at bay by clumsily whacking it away with my combat knife. The thick layers of gear and some tightly wrapped bandages kept some of my more telling features hidden away. The worst problem by far was the showering, but I managed. Eventually, I was found out. While being interrogated and threatened with a bullet to the head, I had made up some story about desperately wanting to fight for my country. I trusted that my forged documents held up to their scrutiny, and that I merely lied about being a man. I had hoped they'd turn me loose in a random town to spare themselves the embarrassment of having accidentally let a woman blend into their ranks, rather than put me in front of a firing squad. I didn't tell them who I really was, and I never told them that I enlisted to find out more about my brother. I couldn't be sure that any one of them wasn't involved in his disappearance. Luckily, or unluckily, war requires bodies to work, and I was good at what I did. My direct superiors stuck their necks out for me. The people I worked with on a daily basis were informed about the situation, and it was put to a vote. They wanted me to stay. My secret was kept from anyone who didn't work closely with me. If someone too high up found out, we'd all be strung up for treason. I studied the woman's face. What was her angle, I thought. The woman in front of me leaned back and teetered back and forth in her chair.
We're going back to Fort Romkin.
She mused.
Want to come?
The world around me screeched to a halt. I opened my mouth to speak, but all that escaped was a dry wheeze of hot air. Before I could regain my composure, I felt a sharp pain on the back of my head, and everything went black. My ears were ringing. My head felt fuzzy and warm as if the tide was lapping at my neck and going out again. I gingerly opened my eyes and found that I was in the back of a spacious limousine. I was surrounded on all sides by the trappings of a luxurious vehicle, carpeted floors, leather seats, and blackened windows. I couldn't make out where they were taking me. This car probably costs more than my house, I thought. The woman who had let herself into my home was sitting in the front passenger seat. In the driver's seat was a man whose face I couldn't see. The woman in front of the car turned around in her seat and leaned over into the back, most likely breaking several safety laws in the process.
You're probably wondering why we picked you up from your home unannounced, and
I cut her off and shouted,
picked up? You bloody kidnapped me. I got up from a peaceful sleep and was going through my morning routine, and you guys?
I pointed accusingly at my kidnappers.
Break into my house, stuff me in a bag, and toss me in a limo.
I finished, my face red from yelling.
a really nice limo.
The woman insisted, raising a single finger in the air.
Sorry about the rough invitation,
Said the man driving the car.
We wanted to get moving and figured we could explain ourselves on the way.
He turned his head and forced an apologetic smile.
On the way where?
I growled.
Introductions first.
Piped the woman.
My name is Diane Swithin.
She gestured to the balding man in the brown suit driving.
His is John Aiken.
The man didn't move to acknowledge his introduction. He looks more like a funeral director than a driver, I thought. Still smiling, Diane continued.
We've brought you here for a specific reason. We understand that you were searching for your older brother and that...
She paused, and a slight, but genuine flash of sympathy spoiled her perpetually smiling face.
You were never able to locate him?
I looked down at my hands on my lap. My fingers were threaded together tightly, as if her words would rip me apart if I allowed myself to relax. My insides felt hollow. Diane cleared her throat.
Our organization has ordered us back to the place where Seth spared your life.
She nodded to someone behind me.
We're returning to uncover...
I cut her off.
Seth?
I asked suspiciously.
Who is...
I turned my head slowly, as if my joints were rusty, and answered my own foolhardy question. At the back of the long limousine sat a man. I recognized him. It was the same man who effortlessly slaughtered my companions several years ago.
Hey.
He muttered. Instead of fear, I felt anger.
You!
I raged.
You're the one who killed my squad like it was harmless fun.
I got up from my seat and prepared to lunge at the man.
Quiet!
Diane commanded. Diane, raising her voice for the first time, caught me off guard, so I reluctantly complied. I kept one eye on Seth in case he made a move. He still had a scar on his face from my last-ditch shot at him all those years ago. Still looking mildly annoyed, she continued.
Didn't anyone teach you not to interrupt people when they are talking?
She paused, crinkled her nose, and said,
Anyways, we're asking you to aid us in infiltrating that bunker. The one you were stationed at supposedly closed down after the war, but we've received information that activity has resumed.
Are soldiers back on the grounds?
I asked. Diane furrowed her brow.
Do you know what they were doing at that compound?
She asked.
It was a base with soldiers and there was a war. What about that exactly is out of the ordinary?
I asked. Diane frowned. I was obviously missing something.
They were experimenting on live human subjects,
she said frankly. My eyes widened in disbelief as she spoke. I hadn't known about anything as vile as human experiments. I remembered the bulky steel doors and security cameras. It was a base. I assumed it was normal secrets. Spies, plans, weapons, but not people in cages.
How do I know you're telling the truth?
I asked, skeptical that the military or government would ever allow such a thing. She shoved a set of grainy photos into my hand. I flipped through them and, as I did, became less and less skeptical of her claim. I saw disheveled civilians guarded by soldiers wearing Ludian uniforms. I saw men in white coats standing next to malformed monstrosities, not quite animal or man. The photos could have been faked, but the last photo convinced me that they weren't. The last photo showed a savaged body, a bear-like monster chewing on a bone, and a pair of men scribbling on clipboards. I remembered the bodies, slashed up beyond recognition, that were being found when I was still working as a soldier at Fort Romekin, near Lude's border with Satru. It wasn't a rumor after all. Mangled bodies were being found, and monsters were responsible for it. Diane cleared her throat.
We've received information that they've continued to perform their sick experiments, and they've kicked it up a notch. They have gained the knowledge and scientific prowess to produce a twisted mockery of life, allowing them to mass-produce living biological weapons.
She explained. Like a puzzle, everything started to fall into place. The civilians we relocated out of harm's way, which under normal circumstances would have been an uncharacteristically kind act in war, must have been the test subjects. We didn't take them away at gunpoint or in chains. We offered to escort them off of a potential battlefield. The fact that they went willingly made the news worse somehow.
How is this even possible?
I demanded.
We aren't completely sure, but we suspect they create the creatures by playing with the genetics of carefully controlled tissue cultures. They start with a few cells and grow them.
Theorized Diane.
And they are getting better and faster at it.
She said, tapping her watch.
They aren't perfect yet, but they are dangerously close to making controllable monstrosities. Can you imagine if someone was able to coordinate attacks using a platoon of the monster you saw in the picture?
Then General Dunn was...
I stuttered.
Indeed,
She replied.
he was aiming for the complete subjugation of the surrounding countries and sought to crown himself as ruler of a new empire by using monstrous killing machines.
He's dead though, right? Seth killed him, didn't he?
I questioned.
You bet I did.
Seth smirked. I shot Seth a venomous look. I didn't hold any affection for General Dunn, but I was disgusted by Seth's pride. Diane snapped her fingers.
You're not mistaken. Seth did neutralize the leader of Lude, but regardless, someone has gotten the fort back up and running.
She explained.
Lude's new leader would never allow this.
I asserted. General Dunn's successor had been markedly less hawkish than the old soldier.
I agree.
Diane responded.
We believe that someone close to the late General Dunn is behind this and that they are doing it secretly.
I didn't know what to say. As a soldier, I had accepted a certain amount of killing. I had my own goal, finding my brother to think of. That in itself was noble, but in the process, I had helped usher numbers of innocent people to the slaughterhouse, under the impression I was shepherding them away from the guns and artillery shells. I thought of the family from the photos I found in the wooden box. Were they experimented on? I thought. My stomach turned.
Where do I come in on all of this?
I asked. I tilted my head in Seth's direction.
I've seen what he can do, and he already got into the bunker once. What do you need me for?
Diane leaned over the seat, getting even closer to my face.
You were stationed at Fort Romkin for years.
She exclaimed.
You should know it quite well, much better than Seth. You're the map.
She threw up her hands excitedly as if being the map was some great honor. I felt a lot of emotions, but honored wasn't one of them. Seth was like me, a soldier. And though he had killed my friends, he was ultimately on the right side of things. Despite that, I didn't plan on forgiving him. But from one soldier to another, I understood. Soldiers kill people. They kill them to survive. They kill them because they are ordered to. They kill them because that's what soldiers have to do sometimes. I glanced over at Seth. If I couldn't hate him for killing my friends, I could still hate him for enjoying it. I glanced over at Seth. I felt fury swelling inside my heart. And this soldier, I thought, might get a chance to take revenge for her friends.
Of course, we wouldn't ask you to do this out of the goodness of your heart. There is something in it for you too, should you accept.
Diane teased, dangling some reward in front of me in the hopes that I would accept her offer.
While we are on our mission at Fort Romkin, I'm sure we could find some time to let you poke around in the personnel files.
She offered.
They might contain some information about what happened to your brother.
I paused and thought hard. This might be my chance to find out what happened to David. I knew there was no guarantee that I would find any information on him, but it was the best chance I had. Not to mention, there was no guarantee these people would let me go back home alive if I refused to assist them.
How did you find me?
I asked.
We have our ways.
Replied John without turning around. It was apparent I wasn't going to get a clear answer. I put on my stoniest face, devoid of emotion.
I can't forgive him.
I pointed at Seth, who smirked back in my direction.
But I'll help you.
I confirmed.
Excellent.
Piped Diane.
We'll meet more of our people, get prepped, and make our way to your old outpost.
She said matter-of-factly.
Hopefully we can stamp out the embers of this conflict before it throws the world into chaos.
John nodded his head. Seth stayed silent.
Welcome to another war.
Diane grinned.